A food allergy diagnosis changes your life. It affects you, your family, your education, your career, your everything. That being said, as with all adversity in life, you have choices on how you can handle it. Some people choose to raise their hands, stand up, and get involved as advocates. They look food allergy right in the face and say, "I've got this." And they focus their energy on empowering others to feel the same way. These food allergy warriors range in age and background, but have one thing in common. They turned their food allergy story into action. Now I'm going to shine a light on them to inspire you to join the fight against food allergies. This is Take Action with Hillary Carter. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Take Action. I'm Hillary Carter. I'm a food allergy mom, food allergy advocate, and proud member of FAIR's Board of Governors. Now, if you watch this show, you know it's a light show. We love to highlight advocates doing important work in the food allergy community. But if you are affected by food allergies, you probably are affected by anxiety and stress and all the things that come along with it. So today, I am thrilled to chat with my friend, fellow food allergy mom and mental health counselor, Jackie Ourman, about all the ways we need to take care of our mental health. Jackie, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
So, we know that the food allergy journey is a long one. There's the beginning of diagnosis and being overwhelmed, and then sort of getting educated and getting your act together and feeling like you've got this. And then the transitions as your kids get older and they start to take on the responsibility. There's so much to unpack there. We're going to get to all things mental health and wellness. But first, let's talk a little bit about your journey, because you are completely amazing. You have a rock star professional background. You have 3 beautiful boys. Some have food allergies, some have celiac. Give us just a little overview about Jackie.
I always say, I'm like, I've lived a long life. At this point, I've had many lives, not all 9, but like many. I have 3 boys. I entered the world of food allergies when my oldest was diagnosed, just before he turned 2 years old, with peanut, tree nut, and sesame allergies. He had a life-threatening reaction to a peanut butter cookie. And I was overwhelmed and scared, and I channeled that energy into advocacy. So kind of like really educating myself and advocating. So that's kind of how I got into the food allergy advocacy space. And then my second son was also diagnosed with similar food allergies. But I kind of felt at that point like I had my arms around it, so to speak, figuratively. Like I understood it. I wasn't terribly shocked because it was in our family. Whereas when my son had got diagnosed, I had never even known anyone who had a food allergy before, let alone, someone that I was caring for. So by the time Jeremy got diagnosed, I kind of felt like I had it a little bit. And then it was a few years later when Jeremy, my middle son, got diagnosed with celiac disease. And let's just say my world got kind of rocked again, because I was like, what are we going to, like food and how much it impacts our lives, and what are we going to do? What are we going to eat? And I was kind of overwhelmed. And then I think I channeled that overwhelm into, okay, let me figure out what we're going to eat. And that's when I went into the culinary space. I went to culinary school and just was like, I wasn't satisfied with the recipes that I was finding and the ways that like gluten-free foods were tasting. And so I felt like I wanted to love and enjoy food again, despite those restrictions. And so that's kind of was the precipice for going to culinary school. And that was exciting. It was something I'd always loved to and always wanted to do. And I think in the back of my mind, and this gave me an excuse to channel it to something positive. And then shortly after Jeremy got diagnosed, I was diagnosed with celiac disease too. At that point, it was like almost a relief to understand where it was coming from, less of like an and
why is all this happening?
like I was like, okay, now it makes sense. And then interestingly enough, like we found out that we have the gene, and then my mom and dad got tested, and my mom got diagnosed when she was, I think, like 70.
Wow.
So, you can live with these issues your whole life and not realize it manifests itself in different ways. Celiac disease specifically, obviously not life-threatening food allergies. It's pretty obvious if you have a life-threatening food allergy. And then, several years later, my youngest son also got diagnosed with celiac disease. So that's kind of my food allergy celiac disease story. I don't know if I'm sure we'll talk about the other work that I've done in between.
For sure. Well, what's so impressive, you're being very humble. You went to an amazing culinary school. I think it's Institute of Culinary Education in New York City, which is like world renowned. You graduated with honors. You worked in the test kitchens of Bon Appetit and Epicurean. You had an amazing food allergy blog, which is still up and running. I know you're not currently working on it, but I looked through. I mean, there are so many amazing recipes. Cafe by Jackie, right? And you can still find it. We'll make sure and link to everything at the end. But the amount of work you did just in the culinary space was amazing. And I mean, I swear we're still like roasting chicken and eating rice over here. My kids are like going to be 9 and 11 this month. So I'm super impressed with that. But then you also went to work in the food allergy advocacy world, working with End Allergies Together. So tell me how that came about.
Yeah. So I had spent, like I said, when Jake was first diagnosed, a lot of years kind of educating myself, educating him, and educating all the spaces that he was in, schools, camps and everything about food allergies, and working with, at the time it was FAN and then FAIR, some of the food allergy walks and things like that. And then I got to a place where I was doing my food blog, where I did recipes, but I also did some advocacy, like awareness. And there came a point when a lot of my blog was on some levels therapeutic for me, right? So like I was actually journaling my experiences as working through these issues, not just writing recipes, but working through these issues. So a lot of the recipes are accompanied by stories, personal stories as it relates to like what I was experiencing at the time, as a mom of children, food allergies, etc. And then I think at the time, my oldest son was becoming a teenager, middle school, and I think was starting to get a little uncomfortable naturally with like, what was his story? What was my story? And it just kind of came up. I think I had posted a blog that made him uncomfortable, and we had a conversation about it. And it just dawned on me at that time that it was no longer really my story to tell, and that I was going to take a step back from like that kind of like advocacy space for myself, and for not that he asked me to, but it just didn't feel like I wanted to continue to talk about our personal lives as much. But I still had all this energy that I really wanted to channel into the space. And so I had come across End Allergies Together at FabBlogCon, which is a food allergy bloggers conference that Jenny Sprague runs. And I just fell in love with the work that they were doing and their mission. And I was like, I want to be part of this. So it was Elise Bates and Kim Hall, Ellen Jane Moss, who is such an incredible part of the organization. And I just felt like the work to fund a cure, and like, because I had done this work to like learn about it and to educate and to advocate, and now I was like, I really was like laser focused on trying to do everything I could to help raise money to find a cure.
It's something that I see sort of over and over as I'm talking to so many amazing advocates, which is all the work that you do before leads to the next, right? So people who are watching this, you might be like, oh my gosh, how could I ever get involved? Whatever your background is, you can use towards the next thing. So all of the work you do with blogging, I know you were doing a lot of social media and marketing type partnerships with them, like it all leads to the next. So everything's relevant and everything does become one big transition to the next. Mm-hmm. So you and I were talking about this a couple of weeks ago. My kids are a little younger, but I was saying to you, obviously I've chosen like quite a public platform to talk about food allergy, but I said, this won't last. Like my kids are going to get to a point where it really will be their story, not mine. And so when that started happening for you, that's, I think, when you started looking into transitioning yet again into mental health counseling. So tell me about that journey, making that decision, going back to school. How did all of that go? Oh, and during COVID, by the way, because why not?
Well, it was actually before COVID. So I had been working for EAT, which I loved, in a role of managing our social media and like helping to coordinate with any of our fundraisers. I think the role is like directors of partnerships and outreach. So like our blogger ambassador program. And part of my job is like staying very attuned to what was happening in the food allergy space on social media. And over time, and not only that, I was like educating myself on the work that EAT was doing with our researchers. So this is twofold, right? So like one side was hearing about the treatment plans and objectives and opportunities that were available for children with food allergies, recognizing that the majority of the most promising of them require exposure to the allergen, which can be very anxiety producing for the caregivers and the children. And hearing some of these researchers talking about how they needed more professionals in the mental health space really inspired me to kind of consider that career path for myself as like the next step in my life. And then I think separately, finding myself now, I don't know how many years it has been, like in the blogging space, in the food allergy space, very inundated in like all of that information all of the time. I think I was starting to realize that was triggering my own anxiety. And that by the time I stopped working with EAT and I had stopped managing social media, I actually took a couple of the social media platforms off of my phone for a couple of months. Because I think that sometimes our interest in becoming informed and aware can also lead to a path of, sometimes becoming triggering for us. And I think that was an interesting thing for me to see at that time. It was like a crossroads. It wasn't the reason for the decision, but it ended up being a benefit to be taking this time to focus on something, yes, that was inspired by my work with food allergies, but wasn't necessarily engulfed in food allergies. And it felt like the right time for that in my life as well.
It makes so much sense. And I've seen this, I'm super involved in the social media world as well. And I will lean in and lean out depending on what's going on in my life. And you see lots of people, and I think this is a great thing to do. Just, not that we even need to announce it, but say, I'm going to take a social media break. I'm taking a mental health break. It's important to remember to stay present, live in your real life, not always just be on social media. And then there's always the pitfall that we know of, making sure you're getting credible information. Most of us are just parents sharing our experiences, but you don't want to hear horror stories or you don't want to get misinformation. And so just making sure you're really making sure what you're paying attention to. So then you go back to school and tell me about that.
So my first semester, I decided I was going to start slowly. I was going to take 2 classes. I think it was in 2018 or 19, maybe it was January 2019. And the first 2 classes I took were Introduction to Mental Health Counseling and then Research. Research really knocked me. Like it was a really tough class, but it was, I will say, like one of the best classes I took. The professor said we needed to come up with a proposal. Like if we were going to decide one day to go into research or go into a PhD program, like she wanted us to come up with a proposal that we would use as part of our application. So like, what is it that you'd want to study? And of course I came into this space with the idea of like doing something to contribute to the food allergy world. So I originally came up with a proposal that I was going to find ways to mitigate anxiety for people who suffer, teens who suffer from food allergies, because, I'm a mom and I always want to find ways to help my kids.
Yeah,
so the whole thing is about,
Yes.
And then I just kept looking for data, because the way that you write a proposal is you have to find data that supports that this issue exists and that you need to address it, right? And I was looking for data to find the, supporting data for like how anxiety provoking this is for teenagers who have food allergies. And not to say that it's not, it's just that the data didn't really, not a lot of it existed, probably just because there hasn't been enough research that's done on it to this day. But what there was a lot of data on was the amount of anxiety that the caregivers have. And there's been several scales that have been put into place and research that has been done for parents and caregivers of children with life-threatening food allergies, and the amount of anxiety that provokes. And that was really a light bulb moment for me, I think. And it was just kind of like an aha of, okay, so, and it's a systemic issue, right? So like a lot of the work that I've learned in mental health is that, yes, children have anxiety with food allergies and not food allergies, right? So like in any child that has issues with anxiety, you know, it can be a systemic issue. And so we have to think about it from the standpoint of a family, a parent, a child, the interactions, right? And so looking to start with the caregiver in terms of finding interventions to help mitigate their anxiety can eventually kind of bleed down to and help out the children too, because it's being modeled, right? So different ways of handling the issue is being modeled differently. So it was interesting for me to kind of reflect on, you know, what was I anxious about as a caregiver of a child, food allergies, and what did I need to work on in order to help my child like through that journey as well. So I thought that was interesting. And that was kind of my aha moment. And I just then found myself realizing that for the first time in however many years, I was spending all of this time and energy learning about so many things and not so inundated in the world of food allergies, which I thought was really healthy for me too. And I'm like in the career that I feel like I've meant to be in my whole life. I like absolutely love the work. It is so rewarding. And I'm really enjoying it.
It's amazing. There's so much there that I want to like follow up on, starting with the parenting and just sort of assuming or believing that the teens have the anxiety, which like you said, there are certainly some who do, but how much the parents carry, because I know, Lord knows I carry it. I mean, that's for sure. I've been very open about this. I've told my story. It's stressful and anxiety producing to have your kids live with food allergies and have to worry about that all the time. So I understand that. And in my time working with other therapists and parenting groups, I've heard over and over and over that 99% of parenting is about the parent. Mm-hmm. So it's so easy to point to the kid and be like, my kid has this wrong or that wrong. But it's usually the behavior that we have that we are modeling as a parent that they see and they mirror, which is a lot of stress too. Got to get it right. So let's talk about anxiety. Let's talk about the anxiety that caregivers can have, maybe the reasons why. It's pretty obvious, but when you talk to food allergy parents, what kind of tools do you give them? What kind of resources can they look for to sort of holistically help themselves if maybe they don't have access to a therapist? How can we make ourselves feel better? How about that big question?
Yeah, that's a really big question. I've learned through learning not to make this about food allergy parents or non-food allergy parents, right? So like I actually don't look at it differently for anyone, right? So I start there and I just say like there's anxiety symptoms and then there's anxiety as a disorder. Okay. And
so can you talk about the difference between those two?
Yeah. So symptoms of anxiety, you know, anxious, distress, you know, worry thoughts, you know, feeling like, you know, sometimes we feel it in our chest, we're having difficulty, like usually like you feel it in your body, like knots in your stomach. We all, human beings, that's our fight or flight response system that is embedded in all of us. It's a survival response, right? So we all have times in our lives where we feel anxious, and that information is supposed to help us survive, right? It's just kind of like through evolution, that's kind of a system in our body. It's a warning system in our body, right? So anxiety symptoms in stressful situations is normal, right? And I don't like to pathologize the fact that a mother whose child is allergic to a, you know, type of food is nervous when their child is exposed to eating that type of food. I wouldn't call that pathological anxiety. I would call that like a healthy, natural concern,
normal response
over something that is potentially life-threatening.
Right.
And I think that sometimes we can, you know, blur the lines of saying like it's food allergy anxiety. No, it's a natural, healthy fear, right? Mm-hmm. When that becomes to a place where it's distressing or kind of needs attention is when it interferes with your daily life, right? So, and I mean when it interferes with your daily life in a way that's outside of, kind of what the normal way that it would. So it does interfere with your daily life to have a food allergy, right? Because you have to eat 5 times a day, and it's choices that you have to make. And so it's normal that that's something that you kind of are concerned about when you're faced with it. When it becomes something that makes it so that you are not able to function, if it causes distress to your relationships, if it becomes like a significant social stressor, if it becomes something where it makes it difficult for you to do your job, where you're worrying to a point where it's not actually productive and it's actually unhelpful. If you are, sometimes people will say, like, I read the label 10 times, but I still didn't feel safe eating it, right? Like, if you're not able to do the measures that like are within reason to find some ability to like not feel distressed, then I think then that would be a sign that there's something more significant going on, right? So if you're in that type of distress, I think that it's important to see a professional, right? To work through to see if there are some resources you can utilize to manage it. Techniques, there's cognitive behavioral therapy, acceptance and commitment therapy. There's all sorts of techniques that you can use if you're finding that it's having a significant impact in your day-to-day life. For general worry, right, and anxiety, I talk about self-compassion a lot, right? I think that really connecting in with the fact that like validating that this is really hard for yourself and also for your child. Like I think sometimes as parents, we don't want our children to feel distress because that's distressing to us. And so I think sometimes as parents, we might be like, at least it's not as bad as X, you're fine. It's fine. Don't worry. You're fine. Not allowing them to kind of feel it because we don't want to feel their pain. So it's with the best of intention, but sometimes it can actually feel like, but wait, there's actually something wrong, right? So I think self-compassion is really important and validation is really important to start.
I was just thinking through that when you said it's fine. And I think those are probably like my 2 least favorite words together. It's fine, because it sounds so dismissive. So you're totally right. Like, you know what? It's actually not fine. None of this is fine. It's not fun. It's not normal. And so I really, really, that hits home to just like have compassion, the validation of the scenario you're in. You can still find the positive. You can still excel at life. But I think there's something really important to taking a moment. I know for me, a huge part of all of this was acceptance, which I think is all sort of in the same vein here, but like really allowing yourself to accept what's happened, how to move on from here. Such important tips. So thank you so much. If there is anybody watching who thinks to themselves, you know what, maybe it'd be really great for me to talk to a professional. Do you have any tips for the best way to find a therapist locally?
So I actually, I think like I'm a big fan of therapy. Like you don't necessarily need to have a significant level of distress to benefit from therapy personally.
Therapy's awesome. I'm all about it.
I'm all about, like, clearly I believe in this. And, and think it's great also for as an opportunity to introduce to your children at an age when they kind of form their beliefs about what's okay and what's not okay, is to say, like, this is an avenue that's available to you and something that you can see is useful to you. And if it is, great. And if it isn't, it's fine, but we're normalizing it. And so that it's a resource down the line. I think that there's value in that as well. I mean, as far as finding a therapist, I think like what I put on my bio, which I think is really important, is I believe that the relationship between the therapist and the client is the key agent for any success in any therapy. I could know every intervention under the sun, but if you and I don't connect and you don't trust that relationship, and that the relationship is the agent for change. So, research, read bios, check Psychology Today in your area, see if there's somebody that you're interested in or a few people that you're interested in getting to know. Most therapists will do like a 10-minute phone consultation. I offer that free consultation for any of my clients to just kind of see, like, does it feel like a fit? Like, And a lot take me up on it, and not everyone's schedules, and that's okay. Because if it's not a fit in the 10 minutes that we're talking on the phone, it may not be a fit, down the line. And so I want progress for whoever, is seeking therapy. And if it's not with me, I'm totally fine with that.
That's awesome. Well, such good ideas for how to find a therapist if you need one, or even if you don't need one, but you just feel like you want to go because therapy is awesome. Let's go back to just sort of care for the caregiver. I think the first thing we talked about early on, taking some time off social media, taking a break from food allergy can be really helpful. Do you have any other tips day to day for just things that might serve you well or that have served people that you know well, just to stay present, stay calm, stay focused, just general care for the caregiver resources and tips?
Yeah. So, I have this conversation with a lot of my clients and my kids, right? As human beings, I think we're wired for connection with other human beings, which has been really challenging during COVID and for kids and adults alike. But spending time with people, whether it's, on the phone, on Zoom, or in person, and like having time with people who you feel like you can connect with and can understand, that you can be, open, honest, and to have fun with, is really important. And making the time to do that. And then technical term behavioral activation, but basically just physical activity is also really valuable. Whatever form of physical activity is, taking a walk, doing intense HIIT, whatever exercise you like, dancing, like yoga. And then, I would say mindfulness, but I think that word can be difficult for some because I feel like some people feel like I don't know how to do that or I'm not comfortable with that. But I don't think of mindfulness as only meditation. Like meditation is a great practice, and if you have it, that's amazing. But when I think of mindfulness, it's really just being in the present moment. So anything that you do that brings you into this moment right here and now, for one of my sons, like I find him like playing the piano several times a day. Like he just goes down and plays half of a song or whatever, and then leaves. Like, I think that's meditative for him on some levels. Things that you do that you kind of get lost in. Mandalas. People like, those, I don't know if you've ever seen those coloring pages with like the really small, like some people like doing that,
Those are awesome. I love those. I fully ordered them during COVID. We were like all had coloring books.
Yeah, coloring books, puzzles, like anything that brings you specifically in the moment where your feet are. When it comes to anxious and worry thoughts, like if we're talking about anxiety in general, it's really the process of worrying about what's going to happen. So if we're worrying about what's going to happen, we're not actually in the moment that's happening right now. So anything that you can do to bring you back to the present moment. Other things that I actually do there, if I find myself like overactivated, I do something called 4-7-8 breathing. It's a really easy practice that you can do anywhere. It's where you breathe in to the count of 4, you hold for the count of 7, and you breathe out for the count of 8. And that's something you do 2 or 3 times. And you'll notice a shift in your body's like parasympathetic response. You'll feel your body like settle in and relax. And then another grounding technique that I think is really useful, especially in moments when you're feeling like triggered or anxious, is using your 5 senses. So you might notice 5 things that you can see, like put your feet down in the air. Put your feet down in the air. Put your feet on the floor. Put your hands on your lap or on your side. Just straighten up and just kind of like look around your room. Notice 5 things that you can see, 4 things that you can touch. 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. And it's just really kind of like rooting yourself into the present moment, which I think is useful. But as far as what we can do for ourselves, it's really just being with others that I think, spending time with others is really valuable, and nurturing our bodies in whatever way feels like really true to us.
So many amazing tips there. And I've tried most of these things, and it's always just great to remember how simple it can be to just put both your feet on the ground, take a couple of deep breaths, how such little action really can help relax your body. And it's so true about anxiety being the fear of what's to come. And so I know what's always helped me is just to think to myself, especially if it happens to be food allergy anxiety, my boys are safe. I am safe. We are fine. Just sort of mantras like that, like in this moment, everything is good. And I'm not going to worry about anything else right now. So that's always helped me as well. There's so many. I love mantras. Mantras are good.
I love that though. I think that's but that's exactly what it is like you're focusing on what's happening right now in front of you. And I think that that's a really great mantra.
And even for, the food allergies and those of us who have the really, really long list, those of us who have dealt with anaphylaxis, like really, if you're able to remember how many hundreds of good, safe days there were versus the 1 or 2 or 3, however many accidents or reactions, that always helps me put things in perspective as well. So just in case, that's my non-educated 2 tips. This has been incredibly helpful, and I am so happy to chat with you. You really have lived a whole bunch of lives. You've had such so many different careers, and you were raising these amazing boys. I do want to wrap it up, but I want to ask you before we go, as you know, this show is called Take Action. You've taken action in so many different ways. You've shared all kinds of ways we can take action to take care of ourselves. Do you have any final words you'd like to share with the audience? Any final resources you'd like to share?
Yeah, I have a couple of things. The first one is kind of in line with what you said, which is remembering all the days that everything was okay. One of the first things that I remember, Dr. Sishers was our allergist when we went.
And Mount Sinai for everyone who's not local.
And I remember saying what are we going to do? Can he go to school? Is he allowed to go to camp? What am I going to be able to? And he said something to me that really resonated, which is every time you leave your house, you take a risk. He's you took risks to come to this appointment today. You crossed the street, you got in a car, there were all these risks that you took. He's and ultimately you decided that the risks that you took were worth, the end goal or the end thing that you were going to accomplish. And so, yes, there is an additional risk that you have with food allergy, but in life, we're taking risks every single day. And I think that sometimes with food allergies, we get so focused on mitigating risk that we're forgetting that, part of living is assuming some risks, and the risk of food allergy anaphylaxis is real, and it's significant, and it is scary. And it's also, a small risk relative to some of the other risks where we take without thinking every single day. And I think that that's important for perspective taking for us as food allergy parents, or at least for me.
Absolutely. Me too.
And then the other thing I want to say is that before I got into this space, the first person I spoke to was Tamara Hubbard. And I don't know if you know Tamara.
I don't know her personally, but I know who she is. Very impressive.
Is an amazing advocate in this space and is bringing together the mental health community as it relates to food allergies, and trying to help create protocols, and not protocols because she's not doing research, but real allergy informed mental health care, which I think is really important. And most of us are impacted personally by allergies, but she's created not just this directory where there's people who are listed who have experience and want to serve the food allergy community, but these monthly supervision meetings where food allergy mental health counselors meet once a month with other senior mental health counselors who specialize in food allergy and talk about kind of our cases. And it's really been an enriching experience for me to connect with the community and to know that there's someone out there who's been working on this. And so I would highly recommend her resources, her website, for anyone who's looking for specifically a food allergy informed mental health counselor.
That's amazing. Do you know what her website is off the top of your head?
Her Instagram handle is Food Allergy Counselor. And I believe the website is Food Allergy Counselor as well.
That's awesome. So everybody make sure and look into that. This is one of those interviews that I sort of hope people go back and watch a few times because there's so much good information and so much sage advice. I mean, give yourself compassion, take some time off social media, take some time off food allergy, take care of yourself in all these ways, stay present, stay grounded. just a wealth of information. I know I sort of feel better. I feel like I've had a therapy session. You are amazing, and I'm so honored to know you. Tell us where we can find you online.
Thank you. And likewise, my friends, you are
Thank you.
Everything that you're doing. And I want to say that it's so nice to feel that there's so many people that are doing this work now that I've kind of stepped into a different level. It's nice to know that people are still advocating in ways that we need them to. You can find me on Instagram at Jackie Ourman, MHC. I also on Psychology Today, and the practice that I'm working with is Wicker Psychotherapy, wickerpsychotherapy.com. But if you search Jackie Ourman, you'll find me.
Yes, and they'll also find your food blog with all of your wonderful recipes. There's still so much there. I want to go back myself and start doing some cooking. It's amazing. Well, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for the important work you're doing. I know you're really transforming a lot of lives, and I kind of can't wait to watch what happens from here. For everyone at home, thank you so much for watching. Take action. I know that you're going to be inspired as well. As always, we always say, if you're looking for credible food allergy information, go to FARE's website, foodallergy.org. And if you want a friend out here in food allergy land, you can always contact me. I'm at hillarytoldcarter.com and on social media at hillarytoldcarter. Jackie, thank you so much. It was such a pleasure, and I am really excited to be back in touch with you soon. Thank you.